Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bella Gamer, and we're back with another archetype, and this one is particularly interesting. But before I get into any of it, this is a pretty paramount or a very closely linked archetype to a particular AP or adventure path if you're not familiar with the terminology. So, if you don't want to be spoiled on any potential APs, and I'm not going to tell which one, just for the possibility that you might connect the dots by the title of this video, obviously, this is your warning. Okay? Alright, just so you know, the AP will show up in the tags I'm about to show. Okay, got it, good. Today we're going to be talking about the Harrower, which is Pathfinder 2E's tarot reader, fortune teller style of archetype, and it is very closely tied to the adventure path it's found in. So, that one being, of course, Stolen Fates. The Harrower itself is an archetype that uses Harrow cards to predict the future, to allow rerolls on certain kinds of checks, and to empower effects, either to deal damage, having your Twisted Fate, from League of Legends style card thrower that throws exploding cards, or giving buffs like shields, or even returning HP to their allies. It's a very fun and diverse archetype and can be used in a lot of ways and provides a lot of flavor, so I'm very excited to get into it. And speaking of which, let's get into the dedication itself. So the Harrow dedication has an access trait here. Access is mostly just used for society play. So if you're not playing in society, you don't need to worry about it too much. It's not super relevant, and it can obviously be used outside of the adventure path, because why would Pathfinder implement something that can only be used in one adventure? Even lore-wise, wouldn't make sense. So you don't gotta worry about that. And this particular dedication feat has a lot going on for it. Now, you do become trained in occultism, and I'll look it out over here because there's just a lot. And if you are already trained, you can become trained in a different skill of your choice. You also become trained in fortune-telling lore, which tells you the lore of how fortune-telling is done. It's very particular, but this particular lore skill is used with some of the other features of the archetype. So it is something that you might want to consider at least getting up to expert or master in. Then you learn the harrowing ritual, which we'll actually touch on that ritual and what it does here in a moment, but I want to read the rest of the features so that they'll make sense to you. Now, in addition, once per day, you can essentially read your own fortune, drawing from your Harrow deck to have a card of a particular suit that affects you in some way. Now, this particular feature is important because this is the whole core of what the archetype about. It's the feature is called, what is it? It's having an omen. It's having an active Harrow omen. So this will be your active Harrow omen, and it applies many features, plus the additional one that you get in the dedication, which is avoid dire fates. Now, you have to have an active Harrow to do this, so you can do this once per day when you pick up this dedication, and what it allows you to do is, if you fail or critically fail a check associated with the Harrow suit that you drew at the beginning of the day, you treat that failure as either a success or a crit failure as a failure. You're then no longer have an active Harrow omen. That's big. That means that you can actually turn failures into successes really easy with a reaction. If you're not playing a class with lots of reactions, that's huge, as long as you have the right kind of Harrow card, which we'll get into here in a moment. And it then removes your active Harrow, and you can't get another one till your next daily preparations. Now, there's a caveat to that with a feat later, and I have my own problems with that. But let's talk about the Harrow deck and the Harrowing Ritual. Alright, the Harrowing Ritual is a big one, so again, I'm going to be reading it over here because there's a lot. It takes an hour to cast, and it costs rare pigments and inks, totaling a value about 20 gold pieces, times the target's level, which that will also be altered, but overall, not too bad. You use your primary check of fortune-telling lore, which means it's very important to keep that skill, like I said, at least expert or master. Or you can use occultism. Now, you can do this while just being trained in fortune-telling lore, and pretty much is the only way, unless you're playing a rogue or a investigator, to have occultism as expert, or maybe thaumateurs too. They might actually get, maybe not. I'm actually not sure. It's really hard to get expert at second level unless you're playing like a very particular class. But if you're using occultism, you need to be at least expert. So you won't be able to use that, but the dedication comes with fortune-telling lore, so you'll be able to use it regardless. Now, there's a range of touch, so you can only tell fortunes of someone who's essentially within arm's reach, and the target must be willing, so you cannot bestow blessings on people who are not willing. Now, the duration is 1 month or until fulfilled. Now, there's a lot of text here, and I'm mostly just going to boil it down to, it goes into how the tarot reading works, how you spend 50 minutes priming your target, concentrating, meditating, and then the last 10 minutes is you actually reading their fortune, yada, yada, yada. All really, really cool narrative stuff, but not for the purpose of this video. I'm going to talk about what it does. So, as long as a creature is under the effects of this particular blessing, they get an effect based on the Harrow card that you draw and on the level of success you got when you made your fortune-telling lore check. Oh my goodness, that was very hard to say for some reason. Anyway, if you crit succeed, they gain a wild card, and this wild card can be used at any time for 1 month or until they finish using all their cards, which you can get extra cards when you heighten the ritual. And they can, just as a free action, it doesn't actually state, which is really weird. I would feel like it should be a reaction, because otherwise this is a really strong effect. But you can re-roll an action that is the same type of check associated with your suit. And I'm going to pull up the associated suits here so you can see what kind of ones are. Hammers is for strikes specifically, only strikes, but for both melee and ranged. Keys is for any reflex-based saving throws. Con is for fortitude-based saving throws. Books is for skill checks. Stars is for will saves. And crowns is for anything not already stated, which predominantly is going to be flat checks, which, is actually potentially good. It can turn a miss from a concealed condition into a success quite easily, actually. So during this month of time, they can use a free action to re-roll it. And if it's a crit success, they add +4 to the check, which is nuts, which is really good for actually crowns, because that makes a flat check get a bonus, which almost never happens. That's crazy. And then it's done, and they, I guess, are available to have their fortune read again. Now, this overall is balanced, in my opinion, as is, which we'll get to the caveat in a moment. But because it's 20 gold per level, eventually you're gonna, even if you have a level 5 character, that's 100 gold per reading. It will start eating through the character's gold unless they have an absurd amount of money. Now, as a GM, I would state that it's just for a month one way or the other. That would prevent this from being overly abused by a party that has a lot of gold. But this is on a case-by-case basis. If your group doesn't have a lot of gold, this is something that can be that clutch, spending that 100 gold on a gamble to see what kind of suit that the character gets. And it's only one person, so a whole party of level 5 characters, that's, 400 or 500 gold every time you try to do it. That's a lot, and that's crazy. Now, if it's a success on the check, there's no bonus, and if it's a failure, it's a penalty of -4 rather than nothing, but they can still reroll the check, which I don't know if that's better or worse, honestly. You get the reroll, but it could be worse. And then on the crit failure, they just can't do anything, and it's for a month. It just ends. They don't get any wild cards, and it's just over. Now, as I mentioned before, when you heighten this ritual, it gets 1 additional wild card per heightened level, which is actually real insane. Considering this ritual is level 1, that means potentially you can get, 9, 10 wild cards whenever you use this. I mean, granted, it's essentially 20 gold per level, but that becomes much like at level 5 when you are casting what at this level would be level 4 spells, pretty much. No, level 3 spells. What I'm talking about, I'm dumb. Level 3 spells. That's 15 gold for 3 cards. Not 15 gold. What am I talking about? That's 100 gold for 3 cards, which means that's 33 gold a card. I don't know why. 33.333 or 33, I guess. I don't know. That's an interesting one. I don't want to think about that anymore. That's a lot of gold, but it's pretty. That's really good. That's better than buying health potions in some situations. So that almost is real worth it. It's a very powerful ritual, honestly. And that's why, like I said, if a group has a lot of money, this is a situation where you probably want to at least make it that once a month thing so the players get some bonuses. But, obviously it's not something that could be overly abused. So, as I showed before, with the associated suits, with the avoid dire fates, this allows you yourself, without casting the ritual, to essentially do this once per day on a reaction, so not quite as good on failing or crit failing a check, which is overall good. I think it's generally, like I said, balanced. But let's look at the rest of the archetype, and then we'll see. So at level 4, you can take Experienced Harrower, and again, I'm just reading a lot of these. I'll bring this over here so I can just face the camera. Experienced Harrower, and there's no prerequisite. And obviously, I mean, well, I guess, yeah, you don't even have to have, like, fortune telling up, which is interesting. When you perform the ritual, the DC is never higher than the standard DC by level, so it can never be made more difficult for whatever reasons. That can potentially be really good. And the cost of the ritual is halved. Uh-oh. And if you're using a fine Harrow deck, which a fine Harrow deck costs like 11 gold pieces. Arguably, it could be said it's hard to find one, but I mean, depending on where you are, the second the player gets a fine Harrow deck, the cost for the ritual is removed entirely. That's a little concerning. That means that every hour they can give their allies more and more wild cards to reroll on specific, admittedly, types of checks. But if you get hammers, for instance, that's a massive power boost to your party. And if you crit succeed the checks as well, if you boost your fortune telling lore a lot, that means you can have your teammates constantly re-rolling at a +4. Whoa. And I didn't mention this earlier, but whatever they re-roll into, they have to keep even if it's worse. So that's important to mention as well. But yeah, that's broken, honestly. It's really, really strong. It's random what checks it is, but most of the checks that are on the list are ones you're going to use quite frequently. And if all you have to do is just expend them all before you can do it again, and you can do the ritual for free, well, this is the most powerful support archetype in the game. Just bar none. So, the advice I gave about having it only once a month is looking better. And honestly, once a month can pass very quickly in a tabletop, depending on what's going on. This is a table-by-table situation, but this can be heavily, heavily abused. Rerolls in general are very strong. A +4 potentially is massive. That's level 18 territory for most other types of things. So, yeah. And it's not even a reaction because it doesn't state as much. It states, at any point during the Harrow's duration, the creature can expend this wild card to immediately reroll any associated checks they just made, gaining +4 status bonus to the reroll. And there's something else I guess I should mention about the ritual as well. It does state that when it's about, you tell their fortune about a course of events that they wish to take, but nothing in it states that the cards need to be used towards that end, nor that you need to actually complete that task to get to get more Harrow drawings. So it's just too vague for how powerful it is. And experience Harrower breaks the only thing that was really keeping it balanced, which was the gold cost. So, yeah, it's, use your best judgments. However you think the rules should be interpreted and that suits your table, fine. But if you just let it kind of go, it's broken. And I mean, even if it's just the task of like hunting a person down, it's just like, wait till we clear this dungeon. That's fine. But then it can be every dungeon. They just have multiple cards. It's just very powerful. It's the whole team. It's, gosh, it's really, really strong. Anyway, let's go on to the next dedication feat, shall we? Next up, we have Harrow Casting, which is very interesting. It's a meta magic. And even though this particular archetype I don't think necessarily sways to Martial or Caster, it doesn't even have the standard DC thing that I mentioned a lot. I think this is good because it makes it so that if you are playing a Caster, this feels very good. Now, it does have a requirement to use this meta magic that you have an active Harrow Omen, at the moment, which means it's very, very strong, but you can only do it once per day until the next feat, which we'll get to. But what it allows you to do is, as a part of casting a spell, you can expend an extra action and add an additional effect. When you Harrow cast, you attempt a DC 11 flat check. If this check fails, you lose your active Harrow at the end of your turn. So it's actually not even an automatic expenditure of your active Harrow, which means you could use this multiple times. But 11, you're likely to fail every other time, at least, probability speaking wise. And I don't know why they didn't just make it the cost because of the next feat, but, we'll get into it. So when you cast it, and actually there's a lot here and they each do something very different. Just know that the spells either do a variety of effects, and depending on what your active Harrow is, it actually increases the effect. For instance, I'll give you one. With keys, until the start of your next turn, you gain a +1 status bonus to your AC and all saving throws. If your Harrow Omen is keys, then this increases to a +2 status bonus instead. So really good, and depending on your luck and getting it with another, with your current active Harrow, this is very powerful as a meta magic, and overall I feel is balanced as, it costs an action and the effects are good, but not good enough to make this like the meta for casters in the game. Overall, very, very solid. I'll leave it up here for just a little longer, and then we're going to get to the next feat, which I just don't like for different reasons than you might expect. All right, now that you've all had a chance to read over the effects of Harrowcast, now we're going to talk about Restore Omen. I don't think this should be a feat. I think this should be an automatic feature with the Harrower anyway. The requirements to use this, obviously, is that you have an active Harrow already. And what it does is, with a 10-minute a century refocus action, you draw a card and you gain a new active Harrow. That means that now you're no longer limited to doing this once every 24 hours, which is really good, and I feel like it should have just been a general feature. I don't know why you essentially have to take a feat for a refocus that everything else just gives you automatically. Like, nothing in the game punishes you this much for a resource that you need for your archetype features. In fact, because of this, Restore Omen is a mandatory pickup if you plan on picking up Harrower at all, which is devastating, honestly. I don't like... I would personally, if anything, if it's for balance purposes, I would say at level 4, you can redraw a card and yada yada. I'd make it like a leveled feature of the initial dedication feat. But using a whole feat to pick this up, I don't like that at all. I think the features are not strong enough to warrant this feat tax. And I feel like overall it's generally balanced. Harrowing Ritual aside, it's generally balanced. So yeah, this is a kind of bummer when it comes to Harrower, is that in order to get essentially the refocus action, you have to expend a feat. For no extra, there's nothing extra here either. It's just essentially a feat tax for using Harrower. Just Unnecessary. All right, next up is Benevolent Spirit deck, and this one's very good as well. It's essentially a defense action. I absolutely love it. It's 2 actions, and you have to have an active hero. You have to have an active hero at the moment. Active hero omen. Yeah, that's what I'm getting stuck on is omen added on, and essentially you can protect you or a willing target within 30 feet. The cards fly out, and depending on your current active omen, you give them a type of resistance of 5 plus a status bonus to their AC. And that's just a general status bonus to AC. So as you can see here, they all each give a different type of damage. And then the resistances actually increase as you level to 10 at 10 and 15 at 15. Strange no 20 at 20, but I guess not many people get to level 20 anyway, so it's not a big deal. And this is a sustained effect, which is very interesting that it's not really mentioned anywhere else, but you must sustain this, and you can sustain this up to a minute to maintain the effects of this particular hero, which is really good. This is a very potent resistance to, types of damage, and a bonus AC, and it's a sustained action, and overall, again, balanced, feels good. This is also like one of the Witch's Hexes, only I think a little bit better. So, I mean, I don't know, really good overall. I like this particular feat. Next up is Harrower Ritual, or Harrow Ritualists, my bad. What it does is when you pick it up, you immediately learn 2 of the list given here of Astral Projection, Call Spirit, Commune with Nature, Legend Lore, or Planar Binding Rituals. And then when you perform any ritual, not even just these, you can incorporate your hero cards into it, getting a +2 status bonus to all skill checks made to resolve the effects of the ritual. You can take this feat more than once. Each time you do, you learn 2 new rituals. So you can pick this one up, I believe it's 3 times. Yeah, 3 times to learn them all. I don't think that's absolutely necessary, but it's good. And not only that, but if you're a ritualist in any capacity, or ritual spells, this gives you a bonus to any ritual. This is an amazing feat and goes perfectly with the ritualist archetype as well. This can make you the best at rituals, and oh no. I mean, I think the bonus... No, do they get a bonus? I don't think they get a bonus to their fortune telling. No, but this can make the bonus higher for that ritual specifically. So the harrowing ritual that can be done for free, that can give a bunch of free rerolls on checks with possible boosts added on. Yeah, now you have a higher chance of making that do even, or getting a critical even more often, making that even more powerful. That's really, again, like, I just think the ritual is just a little too strong, especially when you remove the costs from it. That's just my opinion, though. Maybe yours differ. Anyway, let's go on to the next feat. All right, next we have the opposite of the Benevolent Spirit deck, which is the Vengeful Spirit deck. I like the dichotomy between these two. And this is only level 6. This archetype has a lot of pretty low-level archetype features, which is pretty nuts. Now, in order to use this feature, you must have an active hero omen available. It's 2 actions, and essentially what it does, you become Twisted Fate from League of Legends. You empower a card, and you throw it at a target within 60 feet. And the base damage is 4d6 damage based on your current active hero. Now, the weird parts. It says, with a basic saving throw against your class DC. It doesn't specify. They just omitted what actual saving throw this is on. My assumption would be reflex, because I'm assuming you're throwing a explosive card at someone, and reflex makes the most sense. I wouldn't say pick every time, because that's absurdly powerful, and it would be one of the most broken things in the game. So, my opinion, it's basic reflex saving throw, but as written, it just says basic saving throw against class DC. Bleh. So, yeah. Not only that, but this one also automatically upgrades as you level. And, oh, I'm sorry, I misread it. You roll a random hero, and if it matches your current active hero, the enemy suffers a -2 to the aforementioned ambiguous saving throw. So that's really good, honestly. That's very powerful. The damage increases to 66 at level 10, 8d6 at level 15. This is really good. And you can actually continue to throw cards as 2 action attacks, I guess, as you sustain the Vengeful Spirit deck. Actually, it's not an attack because it doesn't even have the attack trait. But it's a sustained effect. So essentially, you can spend 3 actions every round, sustaining it, and then throwing a card for 2 actions. Considering how much damage they do, and it's on a basic save so that the enemy is likely to at least take some damage, this is incredibly powerful. And if you're playing a character with haste, you can actually reposition while doing all this pretty easily. Or if you're one of the many classes that can actually sustain, maybe it's a spell. Maybe they say sustain a spell. This actually isn't a spell. It's actually, well, it's a meta magic though. I don't know. That's interesting. There's so many. I like Harrower a lot. But there's a lot of inconsistencies with the general rules and a lot of like holes missing in the rules that it can be kind of abused in a lot of ways. So GMs beware. This is a very powerful archetype. When you sustain it up to a minute, and then when you're done sustaining it, whether it's a minute or if you ever stop sustaining it, you then lose your active Harrow effect. And as you can see here are the type of damages that are done by the cards as you throw them. I really like this effect. And again, this makes the fact that you don't get Restore Omen unless you take a feat even more painful. Because unlike Harrow casting, which you at least have a chance, unlikely, but a chance of maintaining your Omen, once you use this one, your Omen is gone. And it's the same thing for Benevolent Spirit deck. So, I mean, you essentially get 1 feature from your archetype a day, unless you take that 1 feat, then you can do at least 1 of them per combat, which is very balanced, and I feel like is very, very good. Now, we do have 1 more feat here, but before we get into that, please divine the sub button down below to help this channel grow, and if you want to see more futures of what this channel has to offer, more videos like this, many of the other tabletops that we're looking into, it will really help me out a lot. Or if you could at least leave a like, I'd highly appreciate it. But let's go ahead and get to the last feat, shall we? All right, the last feat is Reading the Signs, and it's a fascinating one to say the least. No prerequisites besides the access, which you don't have to worry about usually. And essentially what this does is anytime you're drawing a card of any kind or using a divination effect, or I guess resolving the effects of a divination effect, my apologies, including attempting a saving throw against a hostile divination against you, which is really cool, you gain a +2 status bonus to the check. When you draw a card to determine your Harrow Omen, perform Harrow casting Harrow, or if you activate a magical deck of cards, wink wink, draw 2 cards, and then choose one you prefer as your actual drawn card. You can even use this ability when drawing from the deck of many things, but only once per deck. The unused card is then shuffled back into the stack. So this is overall another thing where you can essentially, whenever you're using the harrowing ritual, you can more accurately attempt to give your allies a better card, or even for yourself. When you're doing your Restore Omen, you can attempt to give yourself a better card. And when you're using the deck of many, you can at least attempt to negate a very bad effect, or to hopefully get a very good effect. Overall, Reading the Signs is a sleeper of a feat because it can be really good in some situations. And because it can be used, the effect can be used for any kind of divination effect or resisting divination effects. This can be used with a wide variety of spells or other rituals as well. This is a very good feat, and it's only level 8. Overall, the Harrower is a very good archetype that has a good mix between support abilities, offensive abilities, and general abilities that affect you even outside of combat, can boost skill checks and the like. This is a good all-rounder archetype that has very good flavor and very good effects. This is generally what I would consider an S-tier level of archetype. There's only thing that really bothers me is how some of the rules are written are kind of vague and can be exploited, and the harrowing ritual itself is absurdly powerful. Now, however you determine whenever until the harrowing is fulfilled, that might be the thing that does it. Obviously, as the GM, you can always adjust things to suit your group based on what you think will make the game more fun. But overall, I think the Harrower is a great dedication, and I'm very happy to get this video out, especially since it's on one of the newer adventure paths that have released for Pathfinder. So hopefully some people are going to be getting into this particular adventure path soon. And hey, even if you're in society play, this is technically legal as long as you're in the adventure path. So, it's all really good. Anyway, that's going to be it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye.